When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello guys, welcome back to the Grease Comics YouTube channel. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about Aerion Brightflame, as he is number 93 on my best character list. I thought it was Mace Tyrell in the last video. I ended up changing some things around because I didn't really like where that was placed at. But yeah, we're going to talk about Aerion Brightflame. He is probably the biggest villain of the Dunk and Egg novellas, at least the first novella anyway. Huge influence in Egg's life and in Dunk himself and where he eventually ends up going. So I thought he needed to be on here at some point of the list, but I think he's lower down here because we don't know a lot about him outside of just the information we're given in the Dunk and Egg novellas, and every like offhand comment mentioned about him. He's one of those characters where we're not even exactly sure like what his age looked like. As again, it suggests that he was born anywhere from 191 AC to 194 AC. Again, really big gap. But before we get further into Aerion as a person, I wanted to give a massive shout out to my Patreons and members for supporting me on this channel and all of that. So I appreciate you guys. If you did want to become one, you do get videos as soon as I like put them on to YouTube. So you'll probably get them days earlier than the normal public will. And also you do get an exclusive video each week. But let's get into Aerion Brightflame. Now, I do want to say, unfortunately, this is the second time I'm recording this. The first time, for whatever reason, my mic just was super loud, and it was basically extremely hard to actually listen to it, even to edit it and try and, you know, fix it in post production. So yeah, I'm gonna do it again for you guys. Hopefully it's still as good as the first one was, but who knows. So Aerion Brightflame is someone that I think is kind of the stereotypical Targaryen male. He isn't somebody that's like a huge build like Maegor or even his father Maekar, but he's someone that was slim and he was kind of average of height. He had the, you know, traditional looks of the Targaryens with their silver gold hair and deep violet eyes. His skin was unblemished. Again, he is kind of the prototypical prince for the Targaryens. He reminds me a lot, especially in appearance, to somebody even like Rhaegar, for instance. And even if you think about his deep violet eyes, that's somewhat of a characteristic of him. Comes from his Dane side, so very similar to Ashara Dane, when we'll see her closer to the normal story, and that was something she was very much known for. But yeah, he's somebody that liked to dress very fashionably, right? He is known to use the colors of, you know, fire and red and yellow and gold. And so he took on the Targaryen colors, but he also put in his own kind of colors. It reminds you a lot of Renly in the way he has like his rainbow guard, or how the way Crescent or Stannis describes Renly as being very flamboyant. That's kind of the way Aerion Brightflame kind of comes off as. But besides that, Aerion Brightflame was the second son of Maekar and Diana Dane. He was someone early on that didn't have really a Targaryen to marry. He had a couple other sisters in Daella and Rhea. He was also older than Aemond and Aegon, but he did have an older brother in Daeron. So he was someone early on that would have kind of had maybe the middle kid syndrome, right? He's not the first kid, but he's also not the last kid. He would have just been in the middle kids. And so I think Aerion definitely had a lot of those issues. A lot of his actions that we're going to see at the Dunk and Egg point of his life kind of seems to show that he is someone that was trying to get his father's attention, whether that be good or bad. He felt like it feels like he was attention starved, that Maekar was not the most attentive father. And even when you look at his mother, Diana Dane, she dies, it seems, quite early on in his life, whether that was from 201 to 209 AC. We don't really know what age that she died at, but if you're looking at, you want to do the math, at the youngest, Aerion would have been 10 years old. At the youngest, Aerion could have been from anywhere from 7 to 10 years old, based upon where you believe, you know, what year he was born in, and then all the way up into like his teenage years. So there's a very big gap there. If his mother did die when he's even younger, that makes even more sense, in my opinion, as to the actions that he does as being this cry for affection because he only had his father left. And his father, Maekar Targaryen, is almost the exact same characters like Stannis, for instance, except being a Targaryen. The two are very similar. If you haven't watched my Maekar Targaryen character analysis, I would really check it out. I talk about his character a lot, and I think that character is a lot of why somebody like Aerion Brightflame becomes the person he is. If you think about Shireen, Shireen is somebody that doesn't seem to get the most attention from her father, and that's kind of the same thing that appears here with Aerion, but instead of kind of going the Shireen route, still being a normal kid, a really good kid, Aerion goes the opposite, right? He's someone that's cruel, he's vicious, seems like he's even mad. He's someone that is looking to make a name for himself, and he doesn't care if he does some pretty dishonorable things to do that. And so we also know that Aerion did own a dragon egg that was gold and silver, which is something of note because that egg will end up at Summerhall with Aegon V, so that is important to note. But also in the early parts of his life, we knew that Aerion threw Aegon's pet cat down a well, though he claimed otherwise. Again, one of the stereotypical things that you'll see in pretty vicious or cruel people. Even I've been listening to a lot of like serial killer documentaries on YouTube, and one of the clear first signs for people that are going to become serial killers is animal cruelty. And so you can see that right away with somebody like Aerion. You even see that this story actually is very reminiscent to what we see with Joffrey and Tommen. So again, keep that in mind. Aerion is someone that would have been a lot like Joffrey in a lot of ways. But after that, Aerion also then visited Aegon in his bedroom during the dead of night and put a knife to Aegon's privates and joked about removing his genitals so Aegon would become a sister he could marry. And this is apparent as well because Aegon, it would appear, right? His mother died probably at a very young age after having him. And so this, I definitely feel like was something that Aerion could have done after their mother's death. You know, lashing out, trying to get some sort of attention in this moment of crisis where his mother has died. I could definitely see that being a reaction to something like that, but we definitely see this relationship between Aerion and Aegon that's not good at all. It's a lot of bullying and trying to assert his dominance over Aegon because he's older than him. It's really psychotic behavior, and that idea of control, I think, that really plagues this character of Aerion, and also not knowing how to manage his emotions. I think that is something that really plagues the character. But again, we don't have any concrete knowledge as to when any of these things occurred before the Ashford tourney. When we get to the Ashford tourney, that's when we really start to actually know certain details and when he did certain things. And so we also have to do a kind of a jump here. At the oldest at Ashford tourney, Aerion could have been 18. At the youngest, he would have been only 15. So if I was going to probably give my guess onto his age, I would say he's probably in the middle. I think being 16 or 17 makes a lot of sense given his actions. So I would predict that during Ashford tourney, Aerion was probably either 16 or 17. But we do see in 209, Aerion traveling to Ashford for the tourney at Ashford Meadow, a famous event that will have huge, huge repercussions on the Targaryen dynasty, and most of them will be because of Aerion himself. But Aerion right away plays the very spoiled, pampered, high lord, but in his case, a prince. He initially mistook Sir Duncan the Tall for a stable boy, ordering him to take his horse and scoffing at him when Dunk said he was a knight. Now, I will say, I don't really think this is like outrageous behavior in terms of given the norms. Like, I think most highborns would react to this. Dunk is a hedge knight, right? He's someone that is barely scraping by, trying to make a living, trying to find some, way in this world. He is someone that would have looked like a servant. And so I don't necessarily instantly go, oh, Aerion's, kind of an asshole because of what he says there. But I mean, come on. But in terms of like, yeah, that's not the best treatment, but I do think that was kind of normal with highborns, especially at this age where they're, kind of in their teen age. Think about yourself in a teenage. Now think about if you're a prince and you have all this power and you're rich. Like, I don't hate on Aerion too much for this because I think a lot of it is more his privilege and where he is, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. But during the tourney itself, once Aerion entered the field, he seemed about to challenge his cousin, Prince Valar Targaryen, who was at this point third in line to the Iron Throne. Again, Daeron the Good was the king during this time, and his son Baelor was to succeed him afterwards, and after him, his son Valar. So Valar eventually would have sat the throne if all things had gone correctly. And it almost feels like Aerion is kind of stoking that fire, right? Aerion definitely cares about his position, and maybe he thought, you know what if I took on Valar? And given his actions later, right after this, we know that he's going to do some pretty dishonorable stuff to Sir Humphrey Harding. Maybe he planned that from the beginning. And so what if he did that to Valar? Maybe Aerion was trying to take out the heir, trying to move himself up in the line, even though he's still way down the line. If you think about his position right now, he's not even really on the map for being the next heir. But it could have been something, right? Trying to prove himself against Valar, the person that's going to come, be the champion. But another part of it is we don't know how good of a jouster Valar was, right? Valar was still pretty young at this time. We don't know how good he was. And so maybe it was Aerion didn't do it because of how good Valar was, maybe. That's possible as well. But we end up knowing that Valar instead chooses to challenge Sir Humphrey Harding. Now, something else I want to talk about is, it seems like Valar Targaryen as well was somebody that was kind of being set up. Who is going to challenge one of the heirs to the throne, right? That's one of the problems. If it goes back to that idea of, Ned talking down with Robert, or who's actually going to go against Valar that actually has any real skill? Everybody would be afraid of actually hitting Valar and something going wrong. So I do think that's another interesting part, right? This could have been set up as being Valar's event to kind of really gain some honor, but Aerion himself, based upon his actions, was trying to make his father proud, or at least get some attention from his father Maekar. But during this, we get some interesting information, right? Egg is yelling for, Humphrey Harding to basically kill Aerion because of all the things that went on. One of the little, nods that, yeah, Aegon's a Targaryen. But we also see during this that Aerion lowers his lance and instead of striking Humphrey's shield, impaled his horse, causing it to crash and fall atop Humphrey. Now, many would have thought maybe this was an accident. A lot of people also would have thought that this was cheating. And during this, it didn't go well for Aerion. Yes, it drew attention to his actions and made him a standout talk of the tourney, but not in a good way. And that would be a constant theme of Aerion throughout his life. He is someone that is almost trying to be like a Daemon wannabe, right? Where Daemon's always trying to get attention, but he actually is somebody that's really skilled. He is good in war and those things. Aerion is not those things, especially at this age anyway. Aerion's actions were called an accident. Egg was certain it was unintentional, and he's most likely right. But Dunk found it difficult to believe that a knight and a Targaryen prince could be so unchivalrous. Again, Dunk is somebody that's really naive to the world. He's very similar to Sansa, for instance, and he believes in, knights wouldn't do those things, especially princes. Well, that's not truly the case. But Lord Ashfur awarded Aerion's charger to Humphrey as payment for the death of his horse, which infuriated Aerion. Again, Aerion is being punished for actions that he believes are not that bad, right? That's a common thing, right? Aerion is spoiled. He's not used to people talking back to him or, not letting him get away with whatever he does, right? Think about the actions with Aegon. Doesn't seem like he gets punished for either one of those things. It seems quite obvious that Maekar does not realize what his son is actually doing until Ashford. So, or maybe he knew some of it, but he didn't know to what extent, right? He didn't know to what extent Aerion was kind of a cruel kind of bastard. But during that night, a puppet show that Dunk and Egg had been witnessing was showing a knight slaying a dragon, and this offended Aerion. Now, I think this is part of just Aerion was already mad, and he was looking for something that he could deal out some punishment to, and so he has his men destroy the puppeteers and all of this going on. And he deliberately broke the fingers of one of the puppeteers, a girl named Tanzel. Dunk was infuriated by this. He attacked Aerion, punching him and kicking him in the stomach and teeth. Aerion's men eventually got Dunk off, and Aerion ordered them to break his teeth with a hammer. But then, Egg saved the day, as he revealed himself to be a prince and to be a Targaryen. They obeyed, but Duncan was arrested for striking a prince of the blood. Now, I don't want to talk about the entire Dunk and Egg novella, of course. We know what happens from here, right? Prince Baelor helps Dunk and says, you should try to do a trial by combat. That's your best way out here. Given that Dunk's a pretty big guy, he might be able to take Aerion, right? As he's already kind of showed that he was able to, beat up a prince. But that doesn't go according to plan, as Aerion is kind of smart, right? So Aerion at this time, right, he's kind of been spinning this whole lie to his father that Dunk basically came up and was beating him up and all this stuff. And Daeron, his older brother, goes along with the story because Daeron is also trying to avoid a punishment and, you know, lying to his father and all of that, because it's basically Egg's word against both Daeron and Aerion, you know, his older sons. And if Maekar goes against his 2 older sons, that brings a lot of shame to his line. So you're put in a really difficult position if you're Maekar, and so he backs his older sons. Again, Aerion doesn't have a good name at this point, right? Like, he keeps dishonoring himself and his family. And so to counteract what Baelor does with Dunk, Aerion makes it a trial of 7, which is incredibly smart if you think about it. Because if you're Aerion, you're sitting here going, this Dunk guy is a hedge knight. He has no friends here. Nobody really cares about him. How is he going to get 6 other people to help him defeat me, along with my father, my brother, and the Kingsguard? How are we going to lose? We have some of the best fighters in Westeros on our side. And that right there is Aerion's whole plan. Now, however, Aerion goes even a step further. Aerion bribes Sir Steffon Fossaway, one of Duncan's few acquaintances at Ashford, to join his side of the trial by promising lordship. In total, Aerion's side consisted of his brother, Prince Daeron, his father, Prince Maekar, Steffon Fossaway, and 3 knights of the Kingsguard. But he was shocked when he saw what was on Dunk's side. Aerion's uncle, Prince Baelor, joined Dunk, as did Sir Humphrey Harding. Again, remember, he was the one that Aerion kind of dishonored, killing his horse in the earlier joust. But we also saw Sir Humphrey Beesbury, as he was a brother-in-law to Harding, again, because of stupid actions that Aerion took that came to bite him in the ass. Sir Robin Risling, and Sir Raymond Fossaway, Steffon's cousin. Again, a plan that once again backfired on Aerion. And Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, one of the coolest characters of this time. But again, I'll spare you some of the details, but during the trial, Aerion put his lance through Dunk's side and struck him from the saddle with a morning star. But however, Duncan refused to yield and used his skills as a brawler from Flea Bottom to beat the prince down. And again, once they're off the horses, Aerion has lost all of his advantage. I talked about earlier, Aerion is a pretty slim guy. He's not going to be able to take on Dunk, who's extremely tall, you know, built, you know, has a ton of muscle. Once you get down to that where it's like you're fighting in the mud, Dunk's going to win that every time. Dunk eventually forces Aerion to repeat his submission before Lord Ashford, ending the threat to Dunk's other champions. However, this didn't go all to plan. Even though Dunk won the trial, Aerion's actions had destroyed House Targaryen. They would never be the same after this, and I would argue they never really had that great of a ruler from this point on. Where Baelor would have taken on the throne would have been a great ruler. It was never the same. Aegon V will become the king, but he's a kind of a mixed king because he wasn't able to manage, you know, the rich and also the poor people. He did a lot of good things for the people, but they kind of get undone anyway. So it's hard to look at Aegon V's legacy. And also, Aegon V also does Summerhall. So, you know, but a lot of that is driven by desperation, something that I don't think would have been in place if Baelor had not died here, as Maekar had accidentally killed his brother, Baelor Targaryen. And Aerion, after this, would be forced basically into exile, as Maekar would hopefully think that this would make more of a man of Aerion to teach him of his actions. But from this point on, right, again, we have to do a lot of speculation. There's not much we can go off of here. If you even look on the wiki, there's not much. If you look in A World of Ice and Fire or even the Dunk and Egg stuff, there's not a lot to really talk about with Aerion after that point. Aerion stayed in Lys for a few years, and again, this is not exactly canon, but it seems to be written in there that it could have happened. He may have fathered some bastard children while living there, and his descendants may still be living in Lys. He served with the second sons for a time while in exile. Makes sense, given he was the second son. Again, remember, Daeron is his older brother. So a lot of interesting stuff there. Like, will we ever get any payoff to that? Will, you know, Daenerys ever see any of these, you know, Brightflame kids? Or is young Griff himself part of Aerion's line? We just don't really have enough details to make that type of claim, but it is definitely possible. But some point, you know, into this exile, Aerion returned to Westeros. Now, we have to think about this, because the Third Blackfire Rebellion happens in 219 AC, and Ashford happens in 209. So there's about 10 years worth of time that we just don't know what was truly going on. And so we have a few years. I would suggest that Aerion might have come back maybe 5 years into exile, or maybe he came back maybe closer to the Third Blackfire Rebellion. Just, it's not clear. It's not easy to kind of determine what was going on. Maybe Aerion could have seen the Blackfire threat about to happen and left for Westeros, trying to get honor and approval and win his place back into House Targaryen. Again, left very uncertain. But during the Third Blackfire Rebellion, the only thing we really have to note here is kind of the finish. We don't have much about the Third Blackfire Rebellion. We know that it was headed by Haegon, the first Blackfire. But outside of that, we don't really know the battles. We know that there were some deeds done, both good and bad. We know Maekar did a pretty good job, and they were able to actually capture Bittersteel, and they were able to kill Haegon. But this is where the problem begins. Haegon seems to have at least thrown away his weapons and died without a sword in his hand, like dying it seems like a prisoner. And we don't know specifically if Aerion was the one to kill Haegon, but it seems to point that way, given the fact that in the source material, we do know that it said that Aerion did some bad action that brought dishonor to himself. We just don't know what it is. And then we hear how Haegon somewhat died. It seems to be that Aerion was the one that killed Haegon. And it would even add up even more, because when we get to how they deal with Bittersteel, they let him go. They're basically letting him go to the wall. And the only people to really protest this is Bloodraven, of course, and Aerion Brightflame. So Aerion Brightflame seemed to be somebody that was cruel and was willing to kill these people that were prisoners. It would all kind of add up. And so Aerion, once again, makes a fool of himself. We know that Aerion was married to his cousin Daenora Targaryen. Together that they had one child, a son ominously named Maegor, born in 232 AC. Really weird name, because not a lot of people really respect Maegor. Like, he is not viewed well, even by the Targaryens themselves. Really weird to name your child after Maegor. Maybe he was someone that was, I don't know, just like the way Maegor was, that he was somebody that dealt with people and he was a really strong king. Don't know why that would have been. We don't know particularly why Aerion named him Maegor, and that's something that would really damper his chances of probably getting further in life just based off of his name, regardless of what his personality was like. That's another thing, right? We know nothing about Maegor Brightflame. We have no idea if he does anything in the future that is important, if his line continues, like does he marry somebody else in the future and continue the Brightflame line? We don't know pretty much a single thing about Maegor outside of he was a possible candidate at the next council for being king after Maekar dies. But another part of this is, if you think about Daenora Targaryen, she was anywhere around 10 years younger than Aerion. So again, just shows there wasn't a lot of Targaryens to marry around this time. But in the same year as the birth of his son, Aerion would die screaming after drinking a cup of wildfire, believing it would transform him into a dragon. But what I'm very interested in is we see that these Targaryens seem to have dreams about the dragons. They have these dragon dreams, and specifically Daenerys has a dragon dream, and that leads her to what she does at the end of book 1 and trying to bring the dragons back. And so from any rational person, like Jorah, for instance, looking at her actions, she seems like she's lost her mind. She's gone crazy. And so I'd be very interested to see if we'll ever get more of Aerion and his end. Was there something telling him that he would become a dragon? Was there anything, like, was he getting dreams like that, or was he just kind of cruel and crazy? We even know his brother, Daeron, seemed to be haunted by these prophecies or dreams as well. And Aegon as well shows those signs. So I'd be very interested to see what we get about him. But in his legacy after his death, only a year later, his father would die, and he dies pretty unfortunately because the Peak Rebellion happens, and we don't know much about it, but it seemed like a pretty stupid rebellion. It seems like possibly it was the lead up to maybe a Blackfire rebellion, but it just didn't go well. The Peaks being one of the biggest supporters of the Blackfires. But at this great council to decide who would come next, it was pretty uncertain. Aemon was a maester. Aegon was still pretty young, and he also was not exactly the person in line to take it. Aerion's son Maegor was still a baby, only a year old. Also coming from Aerion's line, not so good. I think a lot of people would have been very happy that Aerion dies before this happens because it could have been really bad for House Targaryen. We could have seen the fall of House Targaryen if Aerion had taken the throne, if he had lived just a year later. But we see that Maegor's passed over, and that's all we know. Aerion, unfortunately, if his son had maybe a different name and he had been a different man, maybe his son would have been the person that would have eventually climbed the Iron Throne, and there would have been a regency over until he came of age. But no, the throne passed to his younger brother, Aegon V Targaryen, someone he bullied and discredited almost at every point. And that is the legacy that Aerion left behind. He was somebody that was cruel, dishonorable. He was somebody that, just made bad decisions, and it cost his family dearly. Will we ever see his legacy pop up in Winds of Winter with maybe someone like young Griff or maybe even other characters that could possibly be back in the story? Maybe. There's a lot of question marks. George has left Aerion's legacy quite open-ended. Whether it's the children in Lys, whether it's this Maegor kid, we just don't know. So, I hope you guys all enjoyed this. I hope it was as good as the first time I recorded this. I tried to put as much love into this one as I did the first one. I really did enjoy talking about Aerion. But I hope you guys all enjoyed. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.